So wholesale real estate, it's all about creating solutions, and it's so nice to be able to do a profitable wholesale deal and see the seller's situation really work out for the best. This lead came in actually on Friday, and interesting situation. They have a lot of equity in their house. In fact, they bought the house in 1998. They last refinanced it in 2007 for $172,000. So they definitely have equity. They probably are low hundreds, low to mid hundreds at the highest. But they have a foreclosure date. They've been paying the mortgage. They have been paying the mortgage, but they have fallen behind on the regular HOA payments. And a lot of people might not know the HOAs, at least in Arizona, can foreclose if you don't make those regular monthly payments. And they owe like $9,000 now, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And they're like, we kind of want to sell anyways and downsize. They said they're almost 70, have some health issues, etc. So I tried to push the deal forward. It sounded really hot on Friday when I spoke to them, but they didn't really want to say like, yes, we want to sell for sure. How much will you give us? They were more like, can you come out and meet with us? And I kept telling them, I'm like, well, if you want to sell it, I can get you an offer right away, and I'm more than happy to meet with you if we're close on price. If you don't want to sell it, I would definitely, if I talk to an attorney, not a real estate agent. I think they're just kind of scared, and they didn't want to come out right out and say like, yes, we definitely want to sell it, but they were kind of beating around that, and I think that is the case. They're just a little bit timid. So it's interesting. So normally I'd like to make an offer first, because I'd hate to get out there and they're not committed, or we get out there and they are committed but they want a crazy price. But given the situation, especially because this is like a 50-minute drive each way, we got to get out there and make sure we don't miss a deal, because it sounds like a very hot situation where they definitely do have some motivation. So when the client pushes hard to want to do it in person, I always just default to that. Now there's a difference between them pushing hard, like come out and see it because it's so nice, you can't give me a price without seeing it. That's one situation. Another situations where they come out and see us because we don't know how this works, and we have a bad situation, we need help. Two completely different circumstances. So when it's just a price thing, I'm like, well, that's fine. Let's make sure we're in the ballpark here. Let me take a look, call you back if we're in the ballpark. You want me to come out and look at it because you think I need to pay a little more than that still, then, I will. And that's how I handle that. But when it's like this, there's a situation, they're stressed out. It's like, I'm going to err on the side of worst case, we waste a couple hours and get some experience. But best case, we write a, really nice deal. They have a lot of equity, so there's no reason we can't write a deal out of this. So it works for everybody. But what's cool is then, okay, say the cash buyer is going to buy it with the 2-month rent back or post-possession, we can still close in the next 10 days. What it really comes down to is like if they're 100% ready to sell, but they haven't finalized where they're going, that's a really good situation for them, especially if they know like maybe they've done enough research to kind of know where they're moving or whatever, have an idea, but they're like, okay, cool, like 2 months is more than enough time. If they haven't even began to look, and this is why at the beginning of the call, we ask them, like, do you know where you're going yet? Even if you give them everything they want, sometimes they're going to be like a little hesitant just because they're like, well, I don't know. Like if they're planning to buy a house, they're like, well, we haven't really seen exactly what houses are going for, the kind that we want to buy in the area that we want to buy. Knowing that it could be an objection, that they're like, well, we don't know where we're going to move or whatever, they can be scared of that. Like if you give them a couple months right from the get-go, you're like, what if I gave you a couple months too? Like sometimes, not everybody, but a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that solves that. That would be amazing. I always say in regards to the situation and all that kind of stuff, I want to build it up as the best experience for them for possible. And if they're telling me what's going on with their situation, I know how to do that. I know what's important to them. Like these people, I know they need to come up with money in 10 days. I know that having a couple months to stay there would make it less stressful for them to move and finalize finding a place. Because of my situation that I need to buy a house right now and I want one in your area, right? Make it about them. I can tell them, look, I'm willing to be flexible and do all these things no one else would be able to do, but this is going to make your experience amazing. So I'm building the value and selling the value to them. We can make this the best thing in the world as long as we agree on a price. Well, even if they sold retail, they're going to have to agree on a price with somebody. Even though I am subliminally kind of pre-framing it, so when we get into the offer, and I offer super low, and they're like, we need more than that, I've already added all that value, and I'm like, well, I can go back on those points. Well, remember, I'm paying the closing costs. I'm letting you stay there for 2 months. You don't have to move twice. You don't have to pay somebody, some crazy interest rate to borrow the money so that your house doesn't go to foreclosure next week, whatever it is. Then deal with the numbers. That's why the process is qualify the seller, find out what's going on. All these things tell me the situation, and then based on that, then when we go into the numbers, I have an idea of what the seller's thinking, what they want, what the situation is, instead of just going right to the numbers. So many sales objections can be overcame by simply leading the seller. cookies. Just double check. I like to check my emails right before we get back on the road. Just do a quick little catch up, make sure nothing's pressing that needs my attention. I like to check my emails right before we get back on the road. Just do a quick little catch up. I usually always turn down just about everything, but when you're just about to sign the contract and they bring a plate of cookies out, I mean, you gotta have one. And as soon as I took a bite, this house is so clean, I'm so excited. As soon as I took a bite, I went, oh, this is really freaking good. Anytime you have a clean house like that, it's that much easier. Like this one we did a 90-day post-possession. We'll be able to assign that and we'll still close next week, no problem. When you have a clean house and the buyers can see that in the pictures, they feel that much more comfortable with the post-possession because they're like, well, this is how these people live. It's a really good indication usually of kind of how they are, and that makes a buyer feel a lot more comfortable. Plus, I put in the contract a $5,000 holdback and $100 per day if they're not out on time. So in other words, they're gonna get, like, these people have like 30 grand coming to them at closing. They're gonna get 25 at closing, and then they're gonna get the final 5 once they're out here in 3 months. And they were okay with that. The other key to that is if they're not out on that day they're supposed to be out here in 3 months, a $100 per day charge gets incurred. So it holds their feet to the fire as far as the seller and protects the buyer, and that's a big part of being able to get it sold. It's one thing to go to a cash buyer and say, look at this great deal with equity, but you gotta, like, the people want to stay there for a few months. But if you have no paperwork in order and the sellers have no skin in the game, a lot of times they might trash that property on their way out, maybe not necessarily intentionally, but just all of a sudden they're like F it mode. Don't care about the yard, don't care about anything, don't water anything, whatever. So anyways, all that to say, we made it as sellable as possible. Now we've got a clean house, great pictures, the market's going in our favor right now. It's only a few months. The buyer's gonna see that they're really clean, the house is really clean. We'll put in our advertising that we've got a holdback. Actually, honestly, I won't even put in the marketing to our cash buyer, I won't even say anything about the lease back. I'll just send it out, let the phone go like crazy. Like, oh my gosh, funds blowing up. If you want it, there's a 90-day lease back, but we have $5,000 holdback, in the form of a deposit from the seller. If they're not out on time, they can lose that. Plus, there's a $100 per day charge. So somebody's gonna want it and be like, oh my gosh, I want it, and then they'll hear that and they'll be like, that's okay, I still want it, and then we'll crush it and get paid. Crush City, good morning, what's happening? Deals, gotta go get another one today. So I'm super excited. Last night I broke my own rule and I sent this property out to one of our cash buyers. Now, usually I don't do this. I usually won't send it out to any cash buyers before I send it out to the masses, because when you do this, one of the things that you risk is losing profit. And obviously that's never a good thing at all. So a lot of times I don't do this. But in this circumstance, this buyer has bought several properties from me this year. This is the type of property that he loves. One of the easy ones he can use his fund, fund it, make a couple bucks. Doesn't have to make a killing, but he doesn't have to go in there and manage a crew or do anything like that. He kind of leverages the finance side of, like, he's like a wholesale expert, if you will. So I texted him last night, told him about the deal, said, hey, you're the first one that knows about it. Sometimes when you really know your buyers well, you can actually leverage certain buyers to maybe make more than you would if you just send it out to your general buyers. And so that's what's key here, is I feel like we got top dollar. Again, a lot of times I don't do this because I don't want to run the risk of taking money off the table. Sometimes you might even send a deal out and 2 or 3 people want it in the first 5 or 10 minutes. It's a great problem to have, and you can bid them up, above asking price sometimes. So I like to keep my buyers excited and motivated and happy. So we went into this deal thinking maybe we're going to make $5,000. When it was all said and done, we'll make $20,000 on this next week. It would be $25,000, but we dealt with the post-possession, the 3-month post-possession, by offering the buyer a $5,000 credit in exchange for that 3-month post-possession. So he looks at it, he's thinking, well, I'm basically getting really good rent for that 3 months. We're happy because we're still making $20,000. The seller's happy because they're getting a price that works for them. They get to remain in the house for 3 months. But I signed it this morning right before I came into work, so it's a good morning, and now we got to go get the next deal today. So this deal was super special. Not only were we able to help a family who was super stressed out with the foreclosure sale coming up next week, but we're able to keep them in their home through the holidays, and that was really important to them. So wholesale real estate, it's all about creating solutions, and it's so nice to be able to do a profitable wholesale deal and see the seller's situation really work out for the best. So how we worked this out, the seller, it was really important to them to have some time in the house. Plus, they didn't have anywhere to go. So it was important for me to get that figured out so that we could close that deal and come up with a solution. So what we did, guys, we contracted this property at $200,000. We found a cash buyer at $225,000. But instead of making $25,000, we gave up $5,000 to the cash buyer to cover the seller's rent for 3 months. So everybody's happy. The sellers get to stay through the holidays, the buyer gets a house with a whole bunch of equity, and they get compensated for having to wait 3 months before they probably flip this house. And we make $20,000 on the deal. Everyone's happy, we win. This deal was awesome, and now we're gonna go get another deal today.
We wrote this deal at $200,000. We quickly assigned it to a cash buyer at $225,000 and offered them a $5,000 credit for allowing the seller to remain in the home for 3 additional months. That's a $20,000 assignment fee. Let's go flip another house.